I'd like to thank you for joining us today. My name is Bill Baker. I'm with Firestorm here in Atlanta. We understand that it's a beautiful day up your way in New Jersey and in Long Island and that whole New York City area. We'd also like you to be our friend and follow us. Follow us on Twitter, Firestorm Soul, and you can be our friend and like us on Firestorm Solutions on Facebook. There is a hashtag for this session. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We'd like to remind you that the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. And this information should be read in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. Firestorm's delighted to have the New Jersey MEP as our host and co-sponsor of this series. This is part of the Crisis Coach webinar series. You can go to firestorm.com where you can watch past webinars in the series, and you can also register for future webinars. We're pleased to have Joe Cartenuto with us and also Blair Neville. Joe, Blair, over to you, please.
Thanks, Blair. This is Joe Cartenuto, and I'm Director of Workforce Development for New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program. Our mission is really to support manufacturers in the state and help them become more productive, more efficient, more globally competitive in what they do. And we do it through a host of different services that we provide, everything from helping companies manage their energy costs to helping them take advantage of R&D tax credits. We do a lot in the area of process improvement, Lean, Six Sigma, root cause analysis, ISO certifications, and of course business continuity planning, of which our focus is today on helping companies not only address areas of vulnerability, but also help them as it relates to ISO and in assessing their risk. So this topic's becoming increasingly important to manufacturers in the state. Blair, over to you.
Great. Joe, thank you very much. And again, I'd like just to second our appreciation to NJMEP for their support. This area of business risk management and business continuity is definitely is growing, and it's growing in importance, specifically around the things Joe just mentioned, along with things like cyber risk and social media risk. So we're getting involved and engaged in more and more client needs with the support of NJMEP, and I do appreciate their awareness of the importance of it and trying to drive that message through their client base, and thus the webinar series here and what we've been doing for their community. So again, Joe, thanks for your support in this. Karen, you can kind of kick it off. And
yeah. Our presenter today is Karen Mazzullo. She's the Chief Intelligence Officer and the Executive Vice President of Business Intelligence here at Firestorm. And you will enjoy her as she makes her presentation today. Karen?
There's no guarantee of that, Bill, but thank you for the vote of confidence. Hello, New Jersey, and very happy to speak with you today. We have a very good subject. It's about visibility, vulnerability, and how you may be exposed to risks that other people know about and you don't know about. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you can be a bit more aware. If you have any questions, Bill will monitor those, and you can use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen in GoToWebinar. And if you would like to chat with us afterward, you can reach Blair or any of us if you email webinars@firestorm.com, and we'll make sure that Blair gets your message and reaches back out to you. So really what we want you to think about right now is what keeps you up at night. And What happens when you're the target of a threat, and you may be the target of a threat that you, again, didn't even realize? Let's say you manufacture a specific product, we'll say a food product, and someone posts a picture on Facebook of a problem with that product. And they post it at a time, maybe 11 o'clock at night, your people are asleep, nobody sees it until the next day. And overnight, people start resharing it and resharing it. The challenge here, when you get up in the morning and you find out that this has happened, is that you may not find out that this has happened until later in the day. The people who manage, let's say, your social media accounts may not know to inform you or who they should inform. And we don't even know if the image is real. We don't know if it's doctored, if it's faked, and no one quite knows what to do. So in addition to managing all of the other risks that you have in your organization that you know about, there are going to be those that you don't know about and those you don't even know you don't know about. So why might something happen, and how might this information transfer to you? You know, this information shows a block and a wall. So there are people in your organization who might be talking about what's going on, but if you're in a senior position, oftentimes you may be one of the last to know. Why is that? Additionally, if you're in the business continuity area, you may not be at the table of the people that are talking about an issue that occurred. We need to get business continuity folks at that table so that everyone can speak together and share information. So Firestorm wants to take the approach that information plus insight into that information equals intelligence. And it's intelligence that you can then actionably create a plan for which to respond. I'm sorry, I have Roxanne the Wonder Dog with me, and she just unplugged my computer accidentally, so I had to hesitate. So let's talk a little bit about that and how surprises happen. You know, if you've ever sat in on a webinar with our president and COO, Jim Satterfield, also co-founder of Firestorm, he has said the last time a surprise was good when he was 5 and it was his birthday. And I think we just want to illustrate, as you get older, and especially if you're in a senior position, you're managing a company, surprises are not good things. I've always told my team, you know, we can deal with anything as long as I know about it. I don't want to be blindsided by something that I wasn't made aware of. So we want really transparent, open communications throughout organizations, and also with our customers, with our teams, etc. Because today, everything, almost everything that goes on is foreseeable. Every risk, every challenge that you're going to face is something that we should be able to sit down and analyze and map out. And tomorrow, anyone can be found accountable. There's a great deal of new law that's being written as we speak. There are self-driving cars today, so we have to understand what those liabilities might be, and are the manufacturers involved in that liability string. So it's a brave new world. It always has been, and litigation is always evolving to meet the ongoing development of new technologies and tools. So how does, and what does that mean? You know, there are so many people in companies, in leadership positions, that simply say, it's not going to happen here, it's not going to happen to us. We did a poll recently in a session that we had, and one of the questions was how likely was an incident of violence to occur in a specific environment, and a good percentage of the people said, nah, it's not going to happen here. And that level of disaster denial is frightening to us, because we live in a world where, again, everything is foreseeable. And many times post-event, the armchair quarterbacking that you hear is you should have known about this. The outcome would have been different had you intervened in some way. You know, when we think about issues like this, in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, the terrorist in that case was convicted of his crimes in a criminal trial, but there was a civil trial as well that a lot of people forget about. And the jury awarded damages as follows. 2/3 of the liability was to the building owner, and 1/3 of the liability was to the terrorist who planted the bomb. So their rationale was the bombing was an identified vulnerability and a threat, and there had to be responsibility placed on the building owner to protect the tenants and the public. Example 2 is just something recently that happened, although it's been 7 years in the making, and that is the trial of Erin Andrews, former sports broadcaster and TV personality. She was awarded $55 million after being secretly filmed in her hotel room. And the jury assigned 51% of the liability to the man who filmed the video, and he manipulated the peephole in the door, and 49% of the liability to the hotel, because the hotel could have known. They should have known, and they should have taken steps to prevent that filming. And so we have to understand what is the return on investment for the time and the work dedicated to the planning and predictive areas of a crisis plan. So let's look at crisis. After any type of a significant occurrence, there's going to be a response. Depending on the severity of the situation, there may be a crisis. There may be no crisis. We are retained by a number of companies and organizations, and fortunately, we receive a call immediately when something may be occurring, and we get all hands on deck, and we wait to see how it evolves, and sometimes it moves to the next level of a crisis, and sometimes it does not, and we move forward. But we have our crisis management plans in place, message maps in place, everybody's ready. A crisis then is typically defined by the lack of preparedness and loss of control that ensues. So the more prepared you are, the more people around the table, the more mapping that has been done, the more preparedness, hopefully when the crisis does evolve and does hit, there will be more control, and your initial communication efforts during that crisis will not create a second crisis and prolong the event. So I wanted to tell you a little bit, a little story about something that I thought was interesting around this area. And there is a manufacturer of applesauce on the West Coast. And my first exposure to the company is an interesting one. I'd never heard of the company before, and the reason I had heard of them was because they had a recall. And in their messaging explaining the recall, they apologized to me, who had never heard about them before, for something that they had done in 2015. And certainly not just to me, to everyone to whom they were messaging, but it had the effect of saying to me, by the way, you just heard about us. I'm sorry we made a mistake. By the way, we make mistakes a lot. And I couldn't understand why they were messaging in this way. It turns out that the two instances, and actually there are three, the two instances are not the same at all. What happened in 2015 is nothing similar to what happened in 2016, but they equated them as quality issues in my mind. So they started to create a secondary crisis. And what happened was exactly what I explained at the beginning of the call. Someone posted a picture on Facebook of a molded product coming out of their squeeze packages. And for a company that has more than 600,000 followers, consumers on Facebook, and is very highly active and engaged, they suddenly went radio silent. They didn't know how to deal with this crisis. They hadn't sat down with their folks and said, isn't this great? People love us. We're posting pictures every day. We've got contests. We've got philanthropic efforts going on. We're never going to have a problem, so we're not going to sit down and talk about how to handle what if it happens. When it did happen, what they did was they deleted the picture and they went silent for 11 days. This was in 2015. A similar incident happened in 2014. So when it happens this time in 2016, the CEO put out a communication, a press release that basically falls on his sword about how regrettable this terrible thing that has happened is. Well, in my book, it wasn't the most terrible thing in the world. It was a normal process that happens in a food production facility. Occasionally, no matter how cautious and careful you are, some food residue may be left behind in a machine, and that's what it was. So they reviewed it, and they're improving their cleaning procedures. There was no listeria, there was no mold, there was no poor product. There was a black fleck in a product that made people a little nervous, but no one became ill. Jim Satterfield noticed something that I thought was really important, and that was that in their facts on their website, where they prominently displayed this apologetic communication, that they actually advised people, you know, if you're feeling ill, go see a doctor. Well, who's going to pay for that doctor if you're advising us to go see a doctor? So while it seems like a simple issue or a simple situation, this communication and lack of planning on behalf of this team really created a secondary crisis in my mind. And the crisis is short-lived, but the consequences of that are not. We have a blog article on the story on our website this month, and it will be in our newsletter. Look for that. I'd love for you to read that and talk about it with your teams. It's really important when you sit down with your teams that people understand today news is just moving by really, really fast. We have news coming at us from all angles, all sources. It takes time to verify what's true and what's not true. Nobody seems to be doing that. And there is a real bias by the media because they love conflict. Conflict equals ratings, and ratings equal advertisers. So the conflict keeps the media's attention. Currently, I mean, everybody, you know, having Donald Trump out front has been great for many news organizations because, gosh, if there was anything that created conflict, it would be anything that Donald Trump says. Whether it's a little thing or a big thing, the media just gloms onto it. So it's a really good example as you watch that. So news is entertainment. We know that. And we know that networks are looking for sensationalism to drive their ratings and drive their advertisers. You've got to talk to your people about this. I've got a client that we've had for about 1.5 years, and just about 4 months ago, they started to really understand that there's a difference between public relations and crisis communication. While we do both, crisis communication requires that we understand the facts, we understand the circumstances, and that we will not participate in conflict. We are going to significantly improve the outcome for our organization by not immediately releasing press releases with half information. We're not going to communicate with the media about every specific thing that happens. especially not until we know, and not if it's an official investigation. So when we say visibility, vulnerability, in some cases what we're talking about is visibility is a good thing. Advertising and marketing departments in your organization want you to be visible. We want you to put these great press releases out about all of the wonderful things you're doing. You know, it interested me in the situation with the applesauce that suddenly a lot of people were probably being driven to the website of this company that was having the problem. Bill, can you let me know if you can hear me, please?
You're fine, Karen.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I heard a click on my line that I thought I lost. So this company had the opportunity, even though people were coming to their website for a negative reason, they had the opportunity to make sure they had updated really positive information out there. They've got philanthropic work they do. They have school educational work they do. They've got this really neat recycling program for kids. None of that has been updated on their website. As a matter of fact, the way the website is constructed, it looks as if the most recent press release is from 2014. So it gives a really bad impression to visitors, and suddenly, even though you don't want visitors visiting in this situation, they are. You've got to have your house in order. It's important. Additionally, the last message on their Facebook page, at least yesterday, was 10 or 11 days old, and it was of the apology from the CEO. Well, in the ensuing 10 or so days, other things have happened. What a great time to start, I don't know, a cooking contest for their applesauce. How about a fun Kid of the Year contest, or anything with photos or unique ways to recycle their containers. There's so much more that can be said and can be done instead of allowing this perceived crisis to paralyze them from doing what they need to do, which is to conduct business. When we're going to talk about visibility, vulnerability, we're going to talk about two elements. When attention is drawn to your organization and you're being placed in a position of high public awareness, or you're saying something that brings an unusual amount of attention to you or the organization, and you begin to explain yourself. Well, you know, we knew this and we were working on it, or as soon as you start that stutter language, if you're explaining, you're losing. And we have always said if you're explaining, you're losing. Now, that does not mean in some situations at one point in time there may be a public investigation or an official investigation where facts and clear details of something are required. That's different. But if you're standing out front, as in West Virginia with the water crisis a couple of years back, saying, you know, we think there might have been a problem and we're looking into it, that company went bankrupt. And there was just way too much going on for the CEO of that company to stand in front of reporters unprepared, unpracticed, with no knowledge of what had happened, especially after having little sleep for 24 hours and try to make a statement. The other thing that makes you very vulnerable, talking before you know exactly what has happened, or explaining and losing, or the failure to identify publicly available intelligence related to a risk that may be occurring. Visibility vulnerability is when you're under a microscope, but you're in a fog bank and you're unable to see what's going on. You know, in today's world, if someone has ill intent, 80% of the time, somebody else knows about it. 67% of the time, 2 or more people know about it. And when they know, they talk, and when they talk on social media. Now, social media is not just Twitter, it's not just Facebook, it's also new and traditional media as well. It's discussion boards, it can be, there are hundreds of applications. And we have an entire practice dedicated to helping your teams understand that Twitter and Facebook are not just for marketing, but that monitoring is for much more than marketing. It's for monitoring risk. So where are you in the scale? If something were to happen, and this is you, and you go to bed at night and everything's fine, and someone posts something about your manufacturing facility, your third shift has a problem, someone decides to do something in your parking lot as they're leaving their shift overnight, and then somebody else decides to take a video of that and post it to Twitter or to Vine or to Facebook or to Instagram. This is what you wake up to, and this is what happens. Many brand and reputation attacks that we see are first seen on social media, even product recalls. So monitoring your brand on social media and traditional media becomes truly key to understanding where you are. And when a crisis occurs, who knows? Who knows first? Does your team know? Does the media know before you do? Does all of social media know before you do? There's a show on, I think it's the Arts and Entertainment station right now called The Internet Ruined My Life. And if you get a chance to catch some of that, look for it. And quite frankly, every time I watch it, the Internet hasn't ruined their lives. Normally, the people have ruined their lives. Because somebody says something that's just not the smartest thing to say in a public manner. And that doesn't mean that they should receive death threats or any of those other terrible things that actually do happen when the mob mentality hits on the web. But you've got to be prepared for it and understand how it may evolve and occur. So you have to understand how do you know what it is you don't know in a situation where recall or some other situation might happen. Bill, I'm afraid that I have a problem with my timekeeping piece here, and I believe, are we at 11:45? I mean,
yeah, we normally go to 11:45. It's now 11:29.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So how do we know what we don't know? I know that I don't speak Chinese. So that's something I know I don't know. I don't know that there's some other language that I've never heard of that I don't know how to speak. There are a lot of things going on in your own organization that you don't know. Are issues. So how can you move forward on helping you and your teams, again, make sure your teams and everybody is involved, understand where the biggest portion of the graph that represents what you don't know can be identified. Designing a full intelligence network is going to help answer the question of what are your vulnerabilities and threats, and what is it that you don't know, so that you're not going to be surprised. We, as I mentioned, we do a lot of session surveys, and we had about 1,000 people on a session recently. We asked them if they currently used external intelligence to identify potential threats. Okay, 30%, and these are pretty senior people that we have, people who make decisions. So 30% of the people said, yes, we're using something, and that's great. 30% of the people had no clue, didn't know, and 30% of the people said, no, we're not, and they were concerned about being surprised. And that little 3% segment were confused. They didn't know what we were talking about. So when we look at that, we see that there are an awful lot of folks that don't have any external intelligence to identify threats and risks that are emerging. Pardon me, I apologize. Oftentimes when we talk to companies about this issue, they will say, well, marketing handles all that. Well, recently we have a very large company that has more than 500 locations across the country, and they had a death threat. They had an issue at one of their facilities. And marketing did see it go by because they do monitor. And marketing did something that we would never advise happen in that scenario, and that is that marketing engaged with the person issuing the threat. Now, we were able to quickly intervene and get that to stop because we saw it happen because we are monitoring. But this is a relatively new client with us, so that we had not yet been able to correct some of those behaviors. And engaging with someone who is issuing a death threat against your CEO is not something that we want to see happen on a regular basis. So that is a good example of a part of why a more formal program is required. Then, oh, marketing covers that. Again, you have to bring in security, you have to bring in your business continuity folks. Everybody needs to know what's going on. And it creates a much fuller, wholer picture of your company. And that way you can predict what's going on. You can help be a part of eliminating the element of surprise. Because, as we said, most surprises are going to be negative. And you can actually help predict or identify your organization's next crisis. We've been talking about you are going to make wrong decisions in the middle of a crisis. Everything you learn initially in a crisis situation is wrong. We know that. And so decisions may be made on incomplete or wrong information. So that's why we continually monitor during a crisis and assist our clients. And during a crisis, you're going to be forced to choose, sometimes, quite often, between two bad options. So you can have spinach or Brussels sprouts, but there's no key lime pie in there anywhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about the OODA Loop. And the OODA Loop cycles through 4 steps until a conflict is resolved. And where this comes from is, at the time, pilot John Boyd in the USAF ultimately became a colonel. And in the Korean War, pilot Boyd was very, very, very good at his job and was better at his job significantly than other pilots with the same training, the same abilities. And so he was asked, how is it that you're able to create such success? And he said basically what it came down to was, well, I'm just faster than they are. I have to figure out what I think it is they're going to do, and so I react a little bit before they do, and I get a good percentage of the time that I'm right. So the OODA Loop goes through observation, orientation to the situation. So you're going to observe the crisis in your manufacturing facility, in your plant, your company. You're going to orient yourself to the facts. This is what I know. This is what I can deal with. I can now make a decision between at least what I know, and then I'm going to go ahead and act. And as a result of my actions, there may have been some information I didn't know, so I'm going to observe. And from observing and getting that information, I'm going to orient myself to the facts. I'm going to feed forward. So it's a great loop. It's an OODA loop that helps you understand, decide, act, monitor, and adjust. And it's a good thing to remember when you're in a crisis, and it's a bad one, and you're feeling a little bit of panic coming on, go back to this slide, go back to the OODA loop, and think, okay, I have to observe, breathe, orient, breathe, decide, and act. Your response process and decisions during a crisis. First, we need you to focus on what is known, the things you can predict, and then plan and perform associated with that. Now, in the case of the food manufacturer, the applesauce people that we were talking about, when they developed that product, there concurrently should have been a team at the table. And they should have said to the developers or the marketers or the team, okay, what can go wrong with this? Could our packaging cut someone's lip? Okay, we need to make sure our packaging can't do that. And in case it can, do we have some sort of mitigation plan in place? Now, our applesauce has no preservatives. Is it possible that it could mold prior to its sell-by date? Well, if it could, then we need to put these pieces in place in order to respond. They didn't do any of that. Facts, your time, your source verifications, allow you to define your action priorities, and they allow you to assign to people. Once you assign to someone, the biggest skill in managing a crisis after you've assigned a task is following up. Because remember, in that OODA loop, you need more information in order to make the next step. Confirm an activity was completed, and it is pending future action, right, depending on the next group of information that comes in. We have to ask ourselves, what do we know? What are we concerned about? What is the plan going forward? How are we going to get the facts that we need? What are we going to monitor? How? Who's going to monitor it? And then once we have that information, we've started to get a better picture of what's going on. How are we going to communicate it? With whom? By whom? Is there someone who we know is going to do that? And it's not always the PR person. It's not always marketing. It's quite often not the CEO. Recently, Firestorm has been working through something, and we call it the Transparency Communications Commitment. We like our companies that we work with to make this commitment to us and to themselves, and then, as we work through our relationship, to their entire team, and for their teams to make the commitment to them. And what we want to talk about is that communications, like preparedness in general, is a continuous improvement process. We know that. Communication with media in a crisis does not benefit customers, vendors, employees, families, staff, leadership, the community, your board members, or the organization as a whole. It's important that people believe that. When we go to communicate in a crisis, the first question we have to ask is why? Why are we doing this? Is it because of some sense of guilt that we have? Or is there really a reason to do this in order to help our organization grow and become more stable? If it is just to feed the media, you are communicating for the wrong reasons. You must make a commitment to inform appropriate stakeholders and align your thinking with the below. We're going to communicate only directly with customers, employees, family, staff, leadership, board members, community, etc. We're not going to go through the media after a crisis event. Somebody once said to me, well, how am I going to let everybody know that nothing actually happened? I said, well, they're going to go to your website. Let's put it on your website. Let's craft a really great email to folks. The message will get out there. Put it on your Facebook page. The message is going to get out there, but you have to control it, and you have to control where people go to receive it. Be ready for engagement when that happens. Communicate coordination.
Karen?
Hello?
Yeah, Karen, hey, this is Blair. I just wanted to make a comment on what you were saying here. Is that
absolutely.
Something you said a moment ago, and it's something we see often when we deal with a crisis, is that the phrase is, if you're defending, you're losing. And that's part of this message. With a comprehensive communications plan, you're not defending, you're providing information to the right people at the right times. And you have a communications link. In the case of a crisis, at your site, for example, you don't want to be talking to the press and sharing information that you don't know. Once the first responders arrive, they're in control, and they're the ones that can disseminate information around that environment. So again, they're communicating, they're sharing the information that they know. It's not you. Once you as a business understand what's happened and have all the facts, you can provide them in a variety of ways. As Karen just said, your Facebooks, your tweets, your emails. Each of your stakeholders will continue to be informed in a very positive and very upfront way, but on your terms. So again, you're not defending what's happening, you're providing information to the right people at the right time. And it goes a long way with, not even in a crisis situation, but it starts to link back to your customers and your vendors who you want to share what's going on. And that's really important. If there's rumors in an industry, or as you said earlier, Karen, something on a Facebook that doesn't look good, as opposed to taking it off and trying to hide it, if you're contacting the right people at the right time with the right message, it goes a long way to show the quality of the business and the fact that this is not an issue as much as it's an event, and here's how we're handling it, which comes back to that whole crisis communication plan. Who do we talk to? When do we speak to them? Who's in control? And I like to use, personally, I like to use that kind of command and control, because if people sort of understand that, and that's part of that communications plan.
And Blair, what it does is it shows people that you're a mature company that has the ability to deal with something in a mature way. And that's what is so important. It makes people then believe in you as a brand or as a company because you've practiced it. You saw it, you know, and I think that's so important. You really put it well, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. When we look at this maturity aspect, we talk about it in terms of a maturity model. And you can access the brief of today's session with this image and all of the dimensions, Dimension 2, Dimension 3, and Dimension 4 on the Firestorm website. It'll walk you through our risk response maturity model and really help you understand the 5 key dimensions of a crisis and start giving you the blueprint to predict your vulnerabilities and your visibility vulnerability, and help you start thinking about how you might go about establishing an intelligence network. And again, please reach out and contact Blair, or you can contact webinars at firestorm.com, Joe at the NJMEP, and we'll all help you walk through the next steps. In predicting, you want to provide awareness and prevention training, and we also want to make sure we've done a security assessment. In planning, we're going to sit down and really develop your responses, your communications plan with message maps. The actual crisis may not occur in the way you have drawn it up, but just by going through the exercise will allow you to not only see where there may be weaknesses in your teams, but strengths as well, and allow you to assign tasks and strategies to people who are best able to manage those. Last, under perform, train, 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 train. On April 7th, we have something that's really interesting. Even if you are not a school or an organization, you may be a coach or a member of your school's volunteer committees, maybe active in your church. We're going to do a sexting and cyberbullying virtual stress test, 2 hours. And on the 19th, for business, we're going to do an escalated cyber crisis. The last cyber crisis session we did, we had about 1,000 companies participate. We're expecting the same, so go to our website, sign up early. And we will create a cyber breach scenario and help you and your teams walk through it. What next? Download our brief. visibility vulnerability at firestorm.com/briefs. I believe it's up there right now. And you can visit our YouTube channel and look for the NJMEP playlist. And this session, along with all other sessions, will be located there for you. Thank you for participating today and for supporting Firestorm in the past 10 years of Predict, Plan, and Perform. We appreciate the collaboration with NJMEP. And Blair, thank you for your comments and your input on today's call. And that will close it for today. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Karen.